Why wouldn't you survive a single night in an Indian winter dwelling? Now you will learn one of the main secrets of American history. We are used to thinking of ourselves as the pinnacle of civilization, protected from the elements by a button on the thermostat and food delivery services. We spend our winters in warmth, where the biggest problem is a draft from the window or overly dry air from the radiators. We think we could easily survive harsh conditions armed with modern knowledge. But what if this is just an illusion? A modern person who found themselves in conditions that the indigenous peoples of North America considered normal would be faced with a shocking reality. It's not about the lack of gadgets or hot showers. It's about the fact that our entire physiology, psychology, and daily habits are completely unsuited to the real, pervasive cold. Watch the video to the end to find out why modern comforts have made us fragile and what key psychological skill allowed people to survive entire winters in conditions that we would find absolutely unbearable. What if I told you that everything you believed about the cozy winter dwellings of Native Americans is not true? Romantic paintings often depict a smoking teepee or wigwam as an oasis of warmth in the middle of a snowy plain. We imagine people sitting comfortably by the fire, but the reality was quite different and would come as a shock to modern man. These dwellings were not airtight capsules like our homes. They were, in essence, advanced windbreaks designed to breathe. Take, for example, the teepees of the Great Plains tribes, such as the Lakota or Cheyenne. In winter, its construction became more complex. An additional lining called an ozan was installed inside, running along the inner wall to create an air gap. It helped insulate the dwelling and, more importantly, directed the flow of cold air from the base upward to the smoke hole, improving draft. But this did not make the teepee warm in our understanding. The temperature inside was extremely uneven. You could burn yourself by the fire in the center, but just a meter away, near the walls, it was freezing. People slept on raised platforms or thick mats to stay away from the frozen ground. Constant drafts were not a design flaw, but a necessity. Without oxygen, the fire would go out and smoke would fill the entire space. The floor would be the first test. We are used to warm floors, or at least wooden decking. In a traditional dwelling, the floor is compacted, icy earth covered with mats made of plant materials. Sitting or lying on it meant constantly losing heat. The cold penetrated through any covering, requiring constant movement or staying close to the fire. What do you think would be the first modern comfort to let you down in such a situation? The lack of a soft bed or stable heat? Write about it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Are you ready to learn the truth about what really cold means? For us, cold is a temporary inconvenience. We feel it on the way from home to the car, waiting for the bus at the stop, or stepping out onto the balcony. Our brain knows that in 5, 10, or 15 minutes, we will be back in the warmth. It is this certainty of imminent relief that allows us to endure the discomfort. Indigenous peoples did not have such warmth in winter. Cold was not an event, but a state of being. It was a backdrop that never completely disappeared, lasting for months. Even inside the dwelling, as we have already discovered, it was constantly present, hiding near the walls and rising from the ground. This fact completely changes the psychological perception of reality. A modern person, finding themselves in such conditions, would face not so much physical as psychological exhaustion. Their brain, accustomed to comfort as the norm, would perceive constant cold as an emergency situation. The body would be in constant stress, waiting for salvation that never came.
This is ridiculous. My fingers are completely numb. Why are we even doing this?
Indigenous peoples, on the contrary, perceived comfort as a temporary and valuable phenomenon rather than the norm. Their psychology was calibrated to accept discomfort. Cold was not an enemy to be defeated. It was a condition in which one had to live and work. This is a fundamental difference in worldview. Imagine performing any task while constantly freezing. You need to repair a tool, prepare food, take care of your clothes. Your fingers won't obey you. Your brain is preoccupied with only one thought: how to get warm. But for them, this was normal. They knew how to focus on the task at hand, ignoring the signals of discomfort that would be a deafening siren to us. This acclimatization process began at birth.
We keep moving. The cold waits for us.
The sled is heavy today.
Their bodies and minds gradually adapted to the harsh conditions. Their pain threshold and perception of comfort were completely different. Where we would feel suffering, they simply felt a cool day. How many days do you think a modern person could last before the constant cold affected their ability to think clearly? But what if I told you that the main problem was not the cold itself, but what it did to the air you breathe? In the next chapter, we will reveal the secret of controlling fire in a confined space. I will reveal the most closely guarded secret: why fire in a winter dwelling was not only a friend, but also a treacherous enemy. We perceive fire as an absolute blessing. It provides warmth, light, and the ability to cook food. In our view, it is enough to simply maintain the flame. But in the enclosed breathing space of a traditional dwelling, controlling fire was a high art, and mistakes were very costly. The first and main problem was fuel. In winter, the fire had to burn constantly. This required a huge amount of wood. Obtaining this fuel was one of the most labor-intensive and important daily tasks. Moreover, not just any wood would do. It had to be dry. Collecting wet or snow-covered branches was a waste of energy. It was necessary to find dead wood, dead but still standing trees that had not become damp from the ground. This required a deep knowledge of the surrounding area and enormous physical effort. The wood had to be found, cut down with primitive tools, cut into pieces, and transported to the camp. This work consumed thousands of precious calories every day. The second problem, and the one that is least obvious to us, was smoke. We have already mentioned that dwellings breathed. A smoke hole in a teepee or longhouse was vital, but it was also the main source of heat loss. It was necessary to find the perfect balance, to create enough draft for the smoke to escape, but not so much that all the heat would escape with it. Controlling this balance was a complex science. In a teepee, this was done by two special wing valves that turned depending on the direction of the wind. If they were installed incorrectly, the dwelling would instantly fill with acrid smoke. In long houses, this was even more difficult due to the many hearths and the great length of the room. Modern people have no idea how to manage smoke. We are used to fireplaces with perfect draft or exhaust fans. If we found ourselves in a teepee, we would either suffocate in the smoke or let all the heat escape outside in an attempt to get rid of it. And smoke was not just unpleasant, it was a constant factor in life. People lived and slept in the lower part of their homes, under a layer of smoke that accumulated at the top. This smoke was used to smoke and preserve food hung from the ceiling. But it also meant constant irritation of the eyes and respiratory tract. What would be unbearable air pollution for us was normal for them. Lighting a fire is a different story. We have matches and lighters. They had methods that required tremendous patience and skill, such as a hand drill or bow drill. Trying to make fire by friction in the cold, when your fingers won't obey you, is a task that 99% of us would fail at. And losing fire in winter meant disaster. What if everything you've been taught about 3 meals a day is thousands of years out of date? Our approach to food is defined by a culture of comfort. We eat on a schedule, often for pleasure rather than necessity. We count calories to avoid gaining weight. In the world of indigenous winter survival, this whole system is turned upside down. Food is not a pleasure. It is fuel in its purest form. In winter, the human body becomes a furnace that must burn constantly to maintain a temperature of 36.6 degrees. Any drop in ambient temperature increases fuel consumption. Normal metabolism, shivering, even simply breathing in the cold. All of this burns precious calories. Survival in such conditions is simple math. Calorie intake must be greater than or equal to calorie expenditure. A modern diet based on carbohydrates and lean proteins is completely ineffective in such conditions. It provides quick energy that burns just as quickly. Indigenous peoples needed something else, slow, dense, high-energy fuel. And that fuel was fat. Fat is the most concentrated source of calories, which burns for a long time and provides maximum heat. Their diet was based on the consumption of fatty foods. One striking example is pemmican, a brilliant invention for survival. It was a mixture of chopped and dried meat resources, mixed in equal proportions with melted fat. Dried berries were often added to it. This product was incredibly high in calories, light, did not spoil for months, and could be eaten on the go. The bodies of indigenous peoples were metabolically adapted to such a diet. They easily switched to using fats as their main source of energy. The body of a modern person, accustomed to a constant flow of sugar and carbohydrates, would experience a real shock. It simply would not be able to effectively absorb such an amount of fat and would quickly face energy starvation. Therefore, even with a supply of food, modern humans would fail. Their bodies simply would not understand what to do with this fuel. Could you give up the foods you are used to and switch to a high-fat diet for the sake of survival? But even with food available, survival is impossible without the most important resource. In the next chapter, we will learn how they solved the problem of hydration in a frozen world. We live in a world of water abundance. Thirst is quenched by turning on a tap. We drink clean water without thinking about its origin. In the winter world of indigenous peoples, the paradox was that they were surrounded by water in its solid form, snow and ice, but were constantly on the verge of dehydration. Obtaining drinking water was a daily, labor-intensive, and energy-consuming task. The first rule that modern people would break is to never eat snow to quench your thirst.
Do not eat the snow, child.
It seems counterintuitive, but snow has a temperature below zero. To melt it and heat it to body temperature, the body must expend a huge amount of precious calories. Eating large amounts of snow is a direct path to hypothermia and accelerated energy loss. The only way to get water was to melt snow or ice. And for that, you needed fire. This closed the circle of survival. To get water, you needed fuel. To get fuel, you had to expend energy. To replenish your energy, you needed food and water. Each system was tied to the other. The melting process was painfully slow. Imagine how much snow you would need to fill a pot or other container to get even a liter of water. Snow consists mostly of air. It had to be constantly added, tamped down, and monitored to ensure that the container did not burn on the fire. It was monotonous work that took up a significant part of the day. For the furnace, they used dense, compacted snow rather than loose surface snow. But ice was an even better source. It was denser and yielded more water for the same volume. But obtaining ice was a separate task. It was necessary to find a safe body of water, break through the thick ice with primitive tools, and deliver the heavy pieces to the dwelling. All the water they obtained was worth its weight in gold. It was used not only for drinking, but also for cooking. Washing or laundry, as we understand it, was out of the question. Every sip was the result of long labor. This water economy is completely alien to modern people, who use dozens of liters just to take a shower. In the cold, the body loses moisture less obviously than in the heat, but no less intensely. Dry winter air draws moisture out with every exhalation. People simply did not feel thirst as acutely as in summer. Therefore, it was necessary to drink water consciously, forcing oneself to avoid dehydration, which led to rapid fatigue and confusion. Guess what an astronaut and a Lakota warrior have in common in winter? Answer: both wear not just clothing, but a personal life support system. We are used to thinking of clothing as decoration or protection from slight cold. But in the harsh winter conditions, the clothing of indigenous peoples was their personal refuge, their second skin, and its misuse was fatal. Modern winter clothing is based on the principle of heat retention. We wear thick down jackets that create an air layer and membranes that block the wind. But this clothing is designed for short periods of exposure to the cold and low activity. It is not designed to be worn 24/7 for living and working. The clothing of indigenous peoples was an ingenious layered system designed not only to retain heat, but also to manage moisture. They intuitively understood the main rule of survival in the cold. Sweat is death. Wet clothing instantly loses its insulating properties and turns into an ice pack that draws heat away from the body. The first layer, next to the body, was made of soft, treated materials that absorbed or wick away moisture well. The second layer was insulating, usually thick undergarments that created a thick air layer. The third, outer layer, was windproof, made of durable, specially treated materials. But the main secret was not in the materials themselves, but in how this clothing was worn. Unlike us, who button up before going outside, they actively managed their clothing. During high physical activity, walking, chopping wood, they unbuttoned or removed the outer layers so as not to sweat. They preferred to feel a little cold while working rather than get wet. As soon as the activity stopped, they immediately put all the layers back on to retain the heat generated by the body. This constant thermoregulation was a key skill. A modern person wearing their best ski suit would sweat within the first half hour of active work, and then they would freeze as soon as they stopped. We would not survive because we do not know how to use our clothing. We are passive wearers who hope that the jacket will do all the work for us. We would either overheat and get wet or freeze if we chose the wrong layers. Have you ever really thought about how your winter clothes breathe? But even the best clothing is useless if the body underneath it is not ready for exercise. In the next chapter, you will learn about the daily physical training of indigenous peoples. The modern concept of fitness is something artificial. We set aside special time, go to the gym to work on our bodies, which are at rest for most of the day. The indigenous peoples of North America did not have the concept of training because their entire lives were one continuous training session. Their bodies were not just hardened, they were perfectly adapted to the tasks they had to perform. Winter survival is a marathon of physical labor. It's not short sprints, but constant, daily, low and medium intensity work. Let's start with the most obvious: movement. In deep snow, each step requires many times more energy than walking on asphalt. Journeys of tens of kilometers were the norm, not a feat. Then there were everyday tasks. We have already talked about obtaining fuel and water. Imagine the daily necessity of chopping or breaking frozen wood and carrying it back to camp. Imagine chipping ice and delivering heavy ice blocks. This work developed the very functional strength that is so often talked about today. Processing materials, repairing equipment, cooking food, all of this required physical effort. There were no power tools, no automation. Every process from start to finish was done by hand, requiring strength, endurance, and motor skills that we have long since lost. Even the most athletic modern person accustomed to exercise machines would be shocked. Their muscles, trained for short sets with heavy weights, would quickly seize up from monotonous, exhausting work. They would lack the endurance that only constant, lifelong labor can provide. The bodies of indigenous peoples were metabolically efficient. They were adapted to the cold and spent less energy on heating, having more developed mechanisms of internal thermoregulation. Their bodies were machines tuned for maximum calorie economy and maximum efficiency. We have come to the most important point, and it is not physiology. The biggest gap between us and indigenous peoples is in our minds. Our civilization is built on the cult of comfort. We perceive comfort, warmth, fullness, safety, freedom from pain as a basic right, as the norm of life. Any deviation from this norm is perceived by us as a problem that must be immediately eliminated. Indigenous peoples, who lived in harsh conditions, had a diametrically opposite psychology. Discomfort was the norm for them. Cold, hunger, fatigue, and tension were not problems, but simply the background conditions of existence. Comfort, warmth, and satiety, on the contrary, were perceived as temporary luck, as a valuable gift that should be cherished. This shift in perception changes everything. A modern person, finding themselves in a cold dwelling, will spend 100% of their mental energy on how bad they feel. Their brain will scream, "This is wrong! This must stop! I can't stand it!" This internal monologue will exhaust them more than the cold itself. A person from a traditional culture, in the same situation, would simply accept the cold as a given. Their brain would not waste energy resisting reality. They would be calm and focused on the tasks at hand. It's cold. I need to check the firewood supply. I need to repair my moccasins. They would not fight the discomfort. They would simply work within it. This ability to accept is not fatalism, but the highest form of psychological resilience. It frees up enormous mental resources. Instead of panicking and complaining about life, the brain is busy solving practical problems. This is something we have completely lost. Our first desire when faced with any discomfort is to find someone to blame or complain. Living in conditions of constant energy shortage developed what could be called the economy of movement. Every action, every movement of a native was calculated and had its price in calories. Modern man moves chaotically and wastefully because the price of a mistake is zero. We can always replenish our energy by eating a sandwich. In a winter forest or on a plain, unnecessary movement is a waste of fuel that was so difficult to obtain. Indigenous peoples moved smoothly, economically, and purposefully. They did not run if they could walk. They did not walk if they could stand. They intuitively understood how to accomplish a task with minimal effort. This economy was evident in everything, from the technique of chopping wood to the method of moving on snowshoes. Each skill had been honed by generations for maximum efficiency. We, with our habit of rushing around, would burn out in a few hours trying to do their daily work with our inefficient techniques. But there is another, even more subtle aspect: sensory literacy. Our lives take place in a cocoon. We are separated from the world by glass, headphones, and screens. Our senses have atrophied. We don't know how to listen to silence. We don't know how to read tracks. We don't see small changes in the world around us. For indigenous people, their senses were their main tool for survival. They could tell a storm was coming from the slightest change in the sound of the wind. They could tell how cold it was from the crunch of snow. They read the world around them like an open book full of vital information. They noticed a broken branch, a barely visible footprint, a change in the behavior of birds. These were all signs that helped them make decisions: where to go, where to look for resources, when it was better to stay in hiding. Their brains constantly analyzed thousands of microsignals from the environment. So let's sum up. Why would a modern, even physically fit and well-equipped person most likely not survive a single night in conditions that were normal for indigenous peoples? The answer lies not in a single reason, but in a systemic failure. Our civilization is a system that has made us experts in one environment and completely helpless in another. First, there is physiology. Our thermoregulation is disrupted. We are not acclimatized. Our metabolism is tuned to carbohydrates, not fats, which are the only effective fuel in those conditions. Our bodies are simply not ready for such stress. Second, its skills. We don't know how to manage a breathable dwelling. We don't know how to maintain and control fire. We don't know how to get water from ice and snow. We don't know how to manage the moisture in our clothes. Each of these basic skills is a dark forest for us. Thirdly, it's physical training. We are not adapted to constant, daily, low-intensity labor. Our athleticism is a fragile shell that cannot withstand a survival marathon. We would exhaust our strength on the very first day just trying to provide ourselves with firewood. Fourth, and most importantly, is psychology. We are raised in a culture of comfort. Our brains are not adapted to accepting discomfort as the norm. We would break down mentally when faced with a reality where there are no guarantees of warmth, food, or safety. We would spend all our energy on panic and self-pity. The native was our complete opposite. He was a survival expert. His body, skills, and mind were perfectly attuned to this environment. He was efficient, economical in his movements, sensorially literate, and psychologically stable. His dwelling was not a home, but an extension of himself. His clothing was not a jacket, but a second skin. His fire was not a heater, but a partner that required care. His whole life was a unified, harmonious system, tuned for survival. We see that the traditional winter dwelling was not just a shelter, but the center of a whole universe of skills, knowledge, and psychological preparation. Survival in it depended not on the thickness of the walls, but on the resilience of the person inside. This resilience was based on physiology adapted to a fat diet, a deep understanding of fire, water, and moisture, and, most importantly, a psychology that accepted discomfort as the norm. Modern humans, accustomed to comfort as a given, find themselves completely unprepared for this reality. Our technological development has given us incredible benefits, but it has also made us incredibly fragile, cutting us off from the fundamental principles of survival that indigenous peoples knew perfectly well. What struck you most about the resilience of indigenous peoples? Their physical adaptation, the complexity of their skills, or their psychological fortitude? Please suggest topics for future videos that you would like to see on our channel dedicated to the life and culture of the indigenous peoples of America in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our new research.